morning. Great to see everyone this morning. Yasher Koach for being here this morning. Let's just announce our sponsor. We have a sponsor for the year, Baruch Hashem. Le'iloi nishmas Miriam ba'as Avram alav shalom v'shem tov ben Shlomo zichrono livracha. And we thank our sponsor, and the learning this morning should be Le'iloi nishmas, the names that we just mentioned. This morning's topic is a topic that I think is applicable and hopefully inspirational for all of us. And I guess I would name the class the Erev Shabbos Jew, the Erev Shabbat Jew, and what it means to go into Shabbos, how to prepare for Shabbos, and what is that idea of Hachana l'Shabbos, the preparation that we do for Shabbos. So this is as you know, this is a shiur, there's a class in the teachings of Rav Kook. We're going to be looking at the teachings of Rav Kook this morning, but I want to begin with a statement from another great rabbi who is beloved to me, and that is Rabbi Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Soloveitchik of Boston, of Yeshiva University, and he has a very, very memorable comment that he made as part of a tshuva lecture. It wasn't the main part of the tshuva lecture, and if you look in Ala Tshuva, the book Ala Tshuva, it's actually a footnote in the book. It doesn't even make it into the main part of the lecture, but it's a memorable statement that he makes, and I want to just read it to you and share it together with you. So this is the very first source on the sheet, and Rabbi Soloveitchik says the following: "Allow me, please, to make a private confession. Interesting, concerning a matter that has caused me much loss of sleep." What keeps you up at night? Well, you're going to hear what keeps Rabbi Soloveitchik up at night. He says, "I'm not so very old, yet I remember a time when 90% of world Jewry were observant, and the secularists were a small minority at the fringes of the camp. I still remember, it was not so long ago when Jews were still close to God and lived in an atmosphere pervaded with holiness. But today, what do we see? The profane and the secular are in control wherever we turn. Even those neighborhoods made up predominantly religious Jews, one can no longer talk of the sanctity of the Shabbat day. True, there are Jews in America who observe the Shabbat." He says, thank God. And by the way, he's writing this and saying this in the 50s and the 60s. And if we remember back, it wasn't so easy for many, many Jews and to be Shomer Shabbos in those years. And he says, thank God we've been able to accomplish that. We've achieved that there are many Shomer Shabbos in America. He says, true, there are Jews in America who observe Shabbat. The label Shabbat observer, to be Shomer Shabbos, has come to be used as a title of honor in our circles, like Harav HaGaon. But he says, neither really indicate anything, and both testify to the lowly state of our generation. And here, there's the key line. But it is not for the Shabbat that my heart aches. It is for the forgotten eve of Shabbat, the Erev Shabbos. There are Shabbat observing Jews in America, but there are not Eve of Shabbat Jews, of Erev Shabbos Jews, who go out to greet the Shabbat with beating hearts and pulsating souls. So this is Rabbi Soloveitchik. I think it's become a pretty well-known line of Rabbi Soloveitchik. Yes, we have the Shomer Shabbos Jews of America, but where are the Erev Shabbos Jews of America? And what does it mean by that? The spiritual longing for Shabbat, the anticipation of Shabbat, the love of Shabbat. Right, not only the idea that we're keeping Shabbos, Shomer Shabbos, but that we're waiting, we're anticipating the whole week Shabbos. So this is, I think this is a good way to begin, a good background to begin our conversation, and Rav Kook is going to speak about the idea of Erev Shabbos. Before we look at Rav Kook, one more line, and this comes from the Rambam. We know that Rabbi Soloveitchik is always, where did Rabbi Soloveitchik get this idea, this Erev Shabbos? We all know about Shomer Shabbos. What's this, the Erev Shabbos, the anticipation, the longing for Shabbos? It's actually the Rambam himself in the Mishnah Torah. He codifies the importance of Erev Shabbos as well, which again, you would think that's just kind of like a nice add-on, but he has in his Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Chavtes, in Halacha Beis, he writes the following: Ezehu Kavod. This is the Rambam writing. What is considered kavod? What is the honor of Shabbos? Zeh shamru chachamim. This is what our rabbis speak about when we speak about kavod Shabbos. Shemitzvah al adam lirchotz panav yadav v'reglav, that a person should bathe before Shabbos in anticipation of Shabbos. Bechamin, in warm water, hot water, be'erev Shabbos. Mibnei kavod Shabbos. And then he writes the following: Umitatef bitzitzit. And one puts on special garments before Shabbos. And this is, look at the next line, V'yoshev b'kovid rosh. And a person, Erev Shabbos, is already anticipating, kovid rosh, that there's a certain focus and anticipation as Shabbos is about to enter. Miyachel, a person waits, lahakbalat, that a person is waiting, and here we have the term, Kabbalah Shabbos. Kabbalah Shabbos, lahakbalat p'nei Shabbat. They were waiting for Shabbos to enter, Kamoshe Yotzei Likrat HaMelech, in the same way that you would go running to see the king, to see the president, if that person, that individual was coming to your streets, to your community, so too the Shabbos with that anticipation. This is the Rambam, V'chachamim harishonim. And it says, the early Chachamim hayu mekabtzin talmideim. They would bring all their students together, and this is prior to Shabbat, be'erev Shabbat, umitatfim. They would robe themselves, they would put on special garments, ve'omrim, and together they would say, bo'u, let us go, v'nei say, and let us go out, the kurat Shabbat hamelech. Let us go out and greet the Shabbat king. Interesting, uses the word king and not queen here. But here we see in the Rambam has this idea that this is a beautiful way and the ideal way of experiencing Shabbat. And it says this was the way of the great rabbis of the early days. So it's not only we think about Tzfat, the Kabbalists in Tzfat, that they would go out and greet the Shabbat, Kabbalat Shabbat. We see it's earlier than that as well, that the Rambam is speaking about the importance of Erev Shabbos. Okay, so with that background, let us now turn to Rav Kook, and one story that Rav Kook speaks about, and he elucidates, and we'll see in that story, in the way that he explores or explains the story, we'll see a very, very beautiful idea that he expresses about the importance of the Erev Shabbos, the anticipation that we have for Shabbos, the preparation that we do for Shabbos. So here's the story, and I'll tell the beginning of the story, and then I want to just go to the text itself. It's a very well-known story. Not sure if everyone knows it. They always say it's a famous Gemara, but yeah, famous to those that know the Gemara. But it's a famous story for those that know the story. So it's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son who are in a cave, and they spend 12 years in a cave together. It's a Gemara that's found in Shabbos. It's Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis 33. Many point out 33. Maybe it's not a coincidence because 33 is Lag BaOmer. It's Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the story of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Maybe the Gemara put it on page 33 with that little hint. But here's the story. He's in the cave with his son, and they spend 12 years. Well, what do you do 12 years in a cave together with your son? So the Gemara says that they're studying the depths of Judaism and the wisdom of the Torah, the Kabbalah, the deepest ideas. They're spending every single day studying together. The Gemara then says they leave the cave after 12 years. They come outside of the cave. They see people for the first time, civilization. And the Gemara says that they see that people are, in the language of the Gemara, that they are plowing and they are sowing. People are going to work. People are doing the mundane things that one would do during the week. And what does Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Lazar, what do? They look at them, and the Gemara says, with their eyes, they pierce them, that they put them on fire. That's what with their eyes, as they're looking at them, that they can't imagine that this is what people are doing, that this is how they're spending their life. Look at the world that we were just in, the world of learning, the world of Kedusha, the world of sanctity, and the deepest ideas of Torah and belief in Hashem. And here people are just getting up and going to work. They're buying a cup of coffee, they're getting a bagel, they're reading the newspaper, they're plowing and they're sowing. How could it be? So they burn up everybody that they see. That's what the Gemara says. And then a baskol comes out from heaven, Hashem speaks to them, and says, why did you come out of the cave to do that? I would like you now to re-enter the cave, go back into the cave, go back to your room, think about what you've just done, and then you can come out. So that's what they do. They go back into the cave for another 12 months. They then come outside, they leave the cave, and it says that Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, that he continues to burn people up, and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the father, that he heals all the people that his son has burnt. That's what the Gemara says. Okay, there's a lot that needs to be interpreted here. But then the Gemara says the following, and here I want to share this with you with the language of the Gemara. So that's the story up to this point, but I want to bring you into this part of the story. The Gemara then says the following. The two of them are now walking together, father and son, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, his son Rabbi Lazar, and it says, Bahadei, and this is the source number 3, page 1, Bahadei Panya Demale Shabta. The sun was setting right before Shabbos. It was Erev Shabbos. Chazu hahu saba. They saw an older man. To have a naki trey madane asa. He was holding 2 myrtles, 2 branches in his hand. Virahit, and he was running ben hashmashos, and he was running, and it sounds like he was doing what a lot of us do Erev Shabbos, right? You are rushing, you are running as Shabbos is coming in. He maybe makes a purchase of these myrtles, of these flowers that he's bringing home for Shabbos, but here he is running and making his way to finish off his errands right before Shabbos. So they now turn to Rabbi and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, turn to the man. Amru lei, they say to him, Hani lama lach. What are these? Why do you have these myrtles? These, we maybe call them flowers in your hand. So Amr lahu, he says to them, Lekavod Shabbos. I have this Lekavod Shabbos. I'm bringing them home. I'm going to put them on my table Friday night. These are the flowers for Shabbos, these myrtles for Shabbos. And they then say to him, V'tiske lach bechad, is it not sufficient just to have 1? Why do you need 2? So he answers, Chad keneged zachor, 1 is in remembrance or symbolic of the word zachor as Yom HaShabbos l'kadsho, v'chad keneged shamor, and the other one represents shamor at Yom HaShabbat. So Amr lei leberei, so he now turns to his son, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, Chazi Kama chavivin mitzvos al Yisrael. We see how chaviv, how precious are the mitzvot to the Jew and to the Jewish people. And then isiva datayu. And at that moment, their minds were put at ease. So that is the story, and that's how the story ends with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his son who are coming out of the cave. They are really troubled with the idea of the way that Jews are maybe too engrossed in this worldly things and not in spiritual matters. But when they see this man, and they see the man with the myrtles in his hand, he's rushing, he's bringing them home for Shabbos, they say, how chaviv are mitzvah to the Jewish people. Now the question is how to interpret this Gemara. What is the idea of this Gemara? So here Rav Kook says the following, and let's now turn to the top of page 2. This is from the Ein Ayah, his commentary on the Gemara. And he's going to talk about 2 aspects of Shabbos. So let's go to the text of Rav Kook. So you have the top part is the quote, in the bold is the quote from Rav Kook, from the Gemara itself, and then you have the language of Rav Kook. The last 2 lines, page 2, column number 1. Kedushas HaShabbos yesh shnayim bekocha. When we think about the holiness of Shabbos, there are really 2 aspects of that holiness. Ha'echad, one aspect of the holiness of Shabbos, Mashehi mikadeshet u'ma'alet Yisrael b'kedushata ha'elyona, that you have the kedusha itself on the day of Shabbos, that it raises the level of the Jewish people, u'miromemet otam be'etzem kedushat hayom, that the day itself uplifts the Jew, and that's something that we can all relate to, that the day of Shabbos itself, that it's uplifting, it's a spiritual day, it's a day of sanctity. Lamala mikol inanei, it's something that lifts us up above all of the mundane, all the secular, so to speak. Umidavkam b'chavod elyon kedusha elyona, and it's something that connects us with that which is kavod elyon, which is the honor of God, or kedusha elyona, and the highest levels of kedusha. That's one aspect of Shabbos. One aspect of Shabbos is the day itself and what the day itself does for us. However, there's another aspect of Shabbos. Chutz mizeh, one more line from Rav Kook, what we read inside. Hi mamshechet gam kein et koach kol yemei ha'maaseh, that it affects, that there's an overflow from Shabbos to all of the days of the week, in kol chilonotam, with all that is chiloni, right, a word that we know in modern Hebrew today, all that is secular, all that is not kadosh, ushiflotam, and the lowliness of the rest of the week, but there is an effect of Shabbos on all the other days. She'al yedei shehem niskarim b'kedushat haShabbos hinam mitromimim. The fact that they're connected, and we think about Shabbos, so all the days of the week are then uplifted. So what is it that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, what do they recognize in this person who was running with those flowers Erev Shabbos? They recognize that the truth is that person also has a longing for Shabbos. That person has, even in the weekday, even in the mundane, the work that they're doing is not just a secular work. Within that there is spirituality, and when a person has a longing for that spirituality and a longing for Hashem and closeness with Hashem. So everything that person does brings them closer to Hashem. So they recognized at first when they came out of the cave, they said, well, look at this world, look at all these Jews that are involved in all this mundane activity. But then they realized something, that the truth is that the Jew, even though it looks like they're doing that which is mundane, but when that person is connected to Torah, connected to Hashem, and when they value that, when they long for that, and that's what they saw in this older man who was running before Shabbos. What was he running to? He was running to that Kedusha. He wanted that Kedusha, and they recognized that they had to take a step back, and they realized that, you know what, even a Jew, that it doesn't necessarily look like they're engrossed in Kedusha, that they're connected to Kedusha, but the truth is they are, and especially those Jews that have that longing for Shabbos and for that Kedusha. So that's part of what it means, Shabbos and the Hachana for Shabbos. The Hachana for Shabbos, according to Rav Kook, means a person who is longing for that Kedusha, and that Kedusha is not found only in Shabbos, but it's also brought into the week as well. And when we do that, I was in the car with my wife this morning, and I said, well, what are your plans for the day? So she said, well, I'm already thinking about Shabbos. That's what she said. I'm already thinking about who's coming for Shabbos, buying for Shabbos. I have to make the beds. We know a group is coming. So that's already Wednesday morning. So that's what Rav Kook says. When that's part of your week, so you've now elevated your week. That's part of the Hachana of Shabbos. And Rav Kook says something beautiful. This is in the second source on page 2. He says the following, and this brings us to like another Chag, but the Chag of Sukkot. So in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, there was what was called Simcha Beis HaShoeva, which they do today as well. Simcha Beis HaShoeva, all week long that they have celebrations. In the good old days of the Beis HaMikdash, so they would take water, and water was poured on the Mizbeach. That was called the Nisuch HaMayim, that they would take water. Each day they would pour the water on the Mizbeach, called the Nisuch HaMayim, and that was really a prayer for rain in the coming season. But Rav Kook asked the question, if it's Nisuch HaMayim, Nisuch means the pouring of the water, why is it that we call it the Simcha Beis HaShoeva? Now, Shoeva means you're Shoev the Mayim. And what does that refer to? That refers to what you did prior to that mitzvah. You would go down actually to the Mei HaShiloach. Has anybody ever walked through that stream on the southern side of the Beit HaMikdash? It's still there today. The Mishnah says that's what they did. They went down to that stream and they would shoev. They would take that water, they would collect the water, and then they would bring it to the Beit HaMikdash, and that water would then be poured on the Mizbeach. But why call it the Simcha Beis HaShoeva? Why call it the water drawing if it's the water pouring on the Mizbeach? So he says, you know what? At times, the preparation that we do beforehand is as significant, is as special. You know, when you think about a wedding, preparing for a wedding, so how many hours is the wedding? 6 hours? And how about all of those weeks and months beforehand? All that preparation, right? Preparing for the bar mitzvah. You have, okay, that Shabbos, the Shabbos morning, the Kiddush, but how about all that time beforehand? Now that day, of course, is very, very significant, but everything that we put in beforehand, right, the love that we show, all the details that we're concerned with, right, all of that, that's so special. Rav Kook says that we need to appreciate that as well and to see how special that is. And by the way, in Hasidic literature, they talk a lot about the idea of hachana, how the hachana, the preparation for something, is sometimes could be even holier than the act itself. This is something that Rav Levi Yitzchak Barditchev writes. This is in source number 3 in his Kedushas Levi, it's Parshas Vayetze. And he says the following. By the way, they just came out with a translation for the very first time of the Kedushas Levi art scroll, a great translation, a great work. And this is just taken from there, but I'll read the Hebrew. You have the translation below. V'nei yesh od mehakosef mala yisera. He says there's something very special about what he calls the kosef. The kosef is the yearning, the desire to fulfill a mitzvah. He says, ki b'ma'aseh eno rak ma she'oseh. When it comes to the action itself, it's just the action itself. Derech mashal, he says, for example, tefillin. You put on tefillin in the morning. Shemeniach az, that you put on at that time, ein biado ela mitzvahs tefillin. At that, in other words, you put on your tefillin, and then the mitzvah is done. Aval hakosef, but that yearning to do the mitzvah, that desire, that anticipation, v'hitlahavut, and that passion that you have, sheyeshlo the mitzvah gedei la'asod nachad ruach l'borei, that you want to do the mitzvah correctly, hu kolel kol hamitzvot. That's something that takes on even a greater quality and affects every single mitzvah that you do. And this is a big part of Hasidus, this idea of the hachana, right? The way that we prepare for a mitzvah, prepare for Shabbos, for a yontif, for any mitzvah that we do, has a very, very unique quality. And sometimes, as Rav Levi Yitzchak says here, it could be even greater to some degree because of that passion, that desire that one has where one awaits to do the mitzvah. There's actually a story about Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev that he was, it was yontif, and over yontif you don't wear tefillin. And he was actually talking about, interesting that he talks about the example of wearing tefillin. So he was waiting all the days to put on tefillin. We don't always think about that. Right? In other words, all these days are going by and you haven't put on tefillin yet. It was finally the morning after yontif, 8 days later, that he could put on tefillin. He was so excited. His tefillin was in it was in a chest or whatever that had a glass window, and he put his hand through the window, right, to get the tefillin. He was so excited, and there was so much passion there to do the mitzvah that he hadn't done for so long that that's what he did. But that's what Rav Levi Yitzchak is referring to here as well. That desire, that passion, that anticipation for the mitzvah prior to doing the mitzvah. And that's part of what it means, the hachana, the Erev Shabbos. The Erev Shabbos can begin on a Wednesday morning as well. It can begin all week. As you know, there's the halacha that every day we say Yom Rishon LeShabbos, as we say in the Shir Shel Yom, that we're counting down the days, and on Wednesday morning we add L'chun Ranana to the Shir Shel Yom, that by Wednesday, interesting, as I mentioned before, my wife already, Wednesday morning, so is already preparing for Shabbos. So that's the idea of preparation for Shabbos, and how that preparation is something that's so special, right? And that preparation also makes the Shabbos that much more special. Right? If you kind of just go into Shabbos, ordering a little food, Shabbos begins. So I'm not sure if your Shabbos is going to be the same as somebody that puts in all the preparation beforehand. So that's Rav Kook, that's Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. Let's go now to page 3. And Rav Kook talks about something which is done on Erev Shabbos, according to the Gemara. We'll see if this is something that people do here, and how this kind of reveals the uniqueness of Shabbos and what it is that we're anticipating as we're making our way to Shabbos. Says the Gemara, this is top of page 3, this is Daf Yud Beis in Gemara Shabbos, Perek Rishon, Tanya. Chananya Omer, top of page 3 words in, Tanya, Chananya Omer, Chayav Adam Lemashbesh Bigdo, Erev Shabbos. You should check your clothing Erev Shabbos, Im Chashecha, as it's getting dark. Rav Yosef, Hilchasa Rabbasi l'Shabbos. This is a great halacha, a very, very important halacha of Shabbos. Rav Yosef adds on. So what is the halacha? The halacha is that before you start Shabbos, I don't know if you have to go through your closet, but maybe what you're wearing, to make sure that you don't have an item in your pocket. That's what Gemara says. Chayav Adam l'mashbesh bebigdo. Make sure. Now again, we do a little bit less of that because we live with an Erev. Right, most of us here in Yerushalayim, so we don't necessarily think about that. But by the way, you have another issue as well, not only carrying, but you have the issue of muktzah, right, that you're carrying something. Your car keys are still there, a pen is still there. So the Gemara says that is a halacha that one should be careful about, that at least what you're wearing, that you just double check that you're not carrying something that's muktzah, or carrying where you don't have an eruv. Okay. And then Rav Yosef says this is a really important halacha. Hilchasa Rabbasi l'Shabsa. So just look at Rashi's comment just on the right side. What's Hilchasa Rabbasi? Davar Gadol Yesh Kan. Rashi says this is a very important halacha, lahafrisho mi Isser Shabbos, to make sure that you're not going to transgress, that you're not going to do an Isser on Shabbos. Okay, but how does Rav Kook interpret this Gemara? And here he takes it into a beautiful, beautiful spiritual idea. And he says essentially, make sure to check your pockets, that you're not bringing in items from the week into your Shabbos. Not literally that you're bringing in something muktzah or a pen, but make sure you're not bringing in weekday into Shabbos. Check for that. Check for that. Now, what does that mean? Let's just see the language, beautiful language of Rav Kook. And this is from the Ein Hayah. 2 lines down. Again, he quotes the Gemara. Echad mi'yesodei kedushas haShabbos. One of the essential ideas of the holiness of Shabbos, hu lehashvot. It's in order to parallel or to make one et hachayim achitzoniyim, the outer life, maybe the secular life, the mundane life, el erech hachayim hapnimim, and the inner life. shekefi rov hamerchak shebenehem. If you have a far distance, if there's a big gap between the way that you live sort of in your secular mundane life and your holy life, says that's not a healthy thing. Yigram matzav adam, that diminishes the very essence of a person. V'yeh yoter rachok mitzivyono, and you are very far from the purpose, shesam lo adon kol, that Hashem has placed you, hachafetz b'atzlachato, who wants you to succeed and wants your spiritual success. What is Rav Kook saying? Don't bring in, make sure that you're not bringing into Shabbos, and make sure that Shabbos also purifies those things that during the week that maybe you have taken on, maybe you've been influenced in a certain way by things during the week, things that you've seen, things that you've been involved in, that Shabbos purifies that, and you know that that's not part of who you want to be and what you want to be a part of your life, to remove that from Shabbos. Over the years, we've had a lot of people over our home Shabbos, Friday night, Shabbos day, a lot of Balei Tshuva, people that don't know that much about Shabbos. And often when I talk about Shabbos, and interesting when I read this, when I talk about Shabbos to them, I generally will not start with, this is the day that you're out, that Hashem has 39 malachos, and you're not allowed to do all of these things on Shabbos. So what do you say to a person who's learning about Shabbos for the first time? Right, who's sitting at a Shabbos table for the very first time? Like, what do you tell them? Good, you tell them how beautiful and how delicious all the food is. One of the things that I tell them, and people that really don't know, and they're awed by this, and it's not special for us. I say, what we do right before Shabbos? We put away all of our phones, we put away all of our computers, and for 24 hours, we don't touch them. 25. Okay, 25. And they're like, wow. That is so beautiful. I wish I could bring that into my life. Like, I wish our home for 25 hours didn't have our kids on the phone the entire time. And that's what Rav Kook is speaking about. What does it mean to remove everything? Again, you have the halacha. It's certainly halacha. The halacha is, yes, ideally check. Make sure you're not going out with something muktzah. But Rav Kook adds this very beautiful idea. What is Shabbos about? Shabbos is a day that we are to remove all of that which is not who we want to be. Interesting, he says that the word beged has a different interpretation. What does the word beged mean? Or bigud? Anybody know? A traitor, that's right. That we're not true to ourselves. Right, check your clothing, check your beged, make sure that you're being true to yourself, who you really are and who you really want to be. Or are those influences, right, all that you're reading, all that you're seeing, right, all that again, I don't know if people here on Facebook or Snapchat, all this stuff that you're watching and that may be influencing you in a way that's not who you want to be, make sure that you're removing that. And Shabbos is a time to remind us, purify ourselves of that, and to remind us that's not who we want to be as we're going into the coming week. So and by the way, and I'll take your comment one second, and Rav Yosef says, Hilchasa Rabasi l'Shabbos. This is a great halacha of Shabbos. Now, does Rav Yosef need to say that? It's a great halacha of Shabbos to check your pants pocket? So Rav Kook says he's not just saying that what's great in this halacha is this idea. This is one of the depths of Shabbos. This is one of the beautiful aspects of Shabbos, how it purifies, how it forces us. And it doesn't really force, maybe it comes naturally. And it happens to me on Shabbos. Shabbos, you just begin to think about what's really important in life, right? Family and family time and children. And even though I had that little, issue with my son or with my daughter, okay, it's Shabbos now, and maybe that's not so important. Now you enter the week, and so this is what Shabbos is about. It's a beautiful idea, and a beautiful way of thinking about Shabbos. Yes, Roseanne.
I recently read that for those who don't observe Shabbos, they look at all the things we can't do.
Right, okay.
And those who observe Shabbos,
right.
All the things we can do.
Good.
With the family, have good food, have a rest, and all the positives.
Good, beautiful, beautiful. Yes, you could look at this. Well, look at all the things you can't do. You have to remove all this stuff from your pockets and all these laws. And there's so many laws of Shabbos. Where again, as Rav Kook points out, and I think something that we all can relate to, is how beautiful that aspect of Shabbos is. And I find it very meaningful that Rav Kook is talking about that aspect of Shabbos, because traditionally we really just talk about more of the obligations of Shabbos, even the idea of our relationship with Hashem, with that absolutely is part of Shabbos. Rav Kook is not talking about that per se. He's talking about you as a person, you and your relationships, you in your inner life, what Shabbos does for you. Okay, one other example from Rav Kook and about very much our anticipation, the way that we prepare for Shabbos, and the way that we light on Shabbos, the way that we light candles on Shabbos. In the old days, they lit with shemen. That was and some people have, I think it's become popular, more popular in recent days, that people are using oil for the lighting of Shabbos candles or Shabbos oil as they're lighting for Shabbos. But I'll just introduce this with a little anecdote. So those that have been with us, I think you know that one of the special undertakings of Rav Kook is that he would go to the new moshavim and the new settlements. And there was one trip in particular, 1914. Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Karlap was with him, Rabbi Zonnenfeld, other great rabbis were with him, and they didn't want to just say, we sit in Yerushalayim, we do our thing, we're going to go out to the settlements, we're going to go out all the way. They spent a lot of time up north, a number of months, and they were there going from community to community, and they were trying to inspire, trying to bring people to greater observance, doing it in a very sensitive way. So in one of the kibbutzim that they came to, again, these are secular kibbutzim, so Rav Kook gave a talk about kashrus and about the meaning of kashrus, the deeper meaning of kashrut. People were very much taken by it. There was some discussion at that point, maybe we should think about that for our kibbutz. And there was one woman in the audience who got up and said, well, the next thing you're going to tell us to do is you're going to tell us to start lighting candles for Shabbos. So with that, Rav Kook said, okay, let me tell you a little bit about the spiritual meaning of lighting candles for Shabbos. And with that, he convinced everyone, and that woman as well, to light candles for Shabbos. But here he speaks about, it doesn't, in that story that I read, it doesn't share what was that teaching. But here I found the following teaching about lighting candles for Shabbos from Rav Kook. And let's take a look at that. And I think it's very much in line with this idea that we just saw a few moments ago in terms of what Shabbos does for us personally and aligning our values and our priorities, and how Shabbos is a day to do that. So for those that are familiar with us, during Kabbalah Shabbos, we have the Mishnayos that we say, Bamem Madlikin, and right before Mariv, we say a number of Mishnayos that speak about halachos of Shabbos. That's the general minhag, at least in Ashkenaz, the way that we daven. So it speaks about different oils that can be used, different oils that cannot be used. And one of the oils that cannot be used is called shemen kik. That's what it says. That's what the Mishnah says. Velo b'shemen kik. And we're going to look now at the Gemara, Daf Chaf Aleph. This is in Shabbos, not to use shemen kik. The Gemara itself doesn't know, I don't think anybody here in the room knows what that is, what shemen kik. Well, the Gemara didn't know what it was either. It was shemen kik. Well, what is shemen kik? And again, shemen kik should not be used for the lighting of the Shabbos candles. Amar Shmuel. By the way, the basic reason is that it didn't light well. It shouldn't be used. It doesn't bring honor to the home. There is also an issue that maybe somebody is going to adjust it. If it's not oil that's effective, that works well, and it's there, you may accidentally, especially again in the old days, that was your source of light, and you were used to doing it during the week, so you might come to adjust it on Shabbos. So it says not to use shemen kik. What shemen kik? My shemen kik. This is the Gemara. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel gives. There are going to be three interpretations. Interpretation number one: She'iltinhu l'chol nechusei yama. We asked all the sailors of the sea. Right? They know. I guess they know oils and they know all of this exotic stuff. The Amru li. They said Of echad yesh bekarchei hayam. There's one kind of bird. It's really found in quite a distant place. The kik shemo. So what shemen kik? Kik is, it comes from a particular bird, a kind of bird. You use that oil, and that's this oil. It's called the shemen kik oil that comes from a bird, which I guess is called the kik. Yeah, it's the kik bird. So that's one interpretation. Rabbi Yitzchak, Bered Rav Yehuda Amar, Mashka de Kaza. What is that? That's cottonseed oil. Does anybody here use cottonseed oil for anything? Do people cook with that? I don't know. Well, look at what Rashi says, just to the right side. Mashka de Kaza. It says, Shemen she'osim, it's oil that's made, migarinate semer gefen. It's made from the seeds of cottonseed oil. Shikorin, look at the word that he used, cotton, right? It's called cotton. So he's using that word, Rashi is using that word 1,000 years ago. It's cottonseed oil. That should also not be used for lighting the Shabbos candles. And the third opinion, Reish Lakish Amar, Kikayon de Yona. It's oil that comes from that, if you remember that story, going back to Yom Kippur, or whenever you study Yonah, it's the Kikayon. There was some kind of plant that grew, and it was the one that covered Yonah. If you remember, what do you say?
I think it's a gourd.
A gourd? Okay.
In today's Lashon, Kook is considered castor oil.
Castor oil? Okay, interesting. Interesting. Okay, so these are the three kinds of oil. So one way of interpreting this Gemara, yes, these are all possibilities. Rav Kook sees in this, and we spoke about this the other week, a gadata, which means there's something a little bit deeper here that's being said. That all three examples are referring to something in particular. Not only that oil, which by the way, even when it says the kikayon of Yonah, right, that doesn't sound like a particular oil. It sounds like something else is going on there as well. So let's just open with what Rav Kook says. One line from Rav Kook. He says, Shabbos, so what is the oil of Shabbos? What's the light of Shabbos? Shabbos hu yom shekulo kodesh. It's a day, again, I'm reading from Rav Kook right after the bold where he begins his commentary. We'll just see the opening sentence. Shabbos hu yom shekulo kodesh. It's a day that is all holy. Oneg umenucha. It's a day of joy. It's a day of rest. Hadlakas haneros. When we light the candles of Shabbos, Mosifa shalom v'simcha penimit. It brings a inner sense of joy and of tranquility. Alkein ra'ui sheyilmad ha'adam et atzmo az lehistakel ulahavin mahi atzlacha sheyisoda be'emet. And by looking at the candles, and again, I don't know if it means literally looking at the candles, but the idea of that purity of the candles is to remind you of the purity of life and what's really important in life, what the real values are in life. So Rav Kook says the following, three examples. One is you can find this oil across the seas in this bird. What does that represent? He says it represents somebody who is very much engaged, or maybe overly engaged in business, that he's traveling, he's put that as his number one priority, right? If that's your life dedicated to your business alone, so that is puzzle. That kind of oil is not to be used on Shabbos. The Shabbos is teaching us what real purity is. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't be a businessman. Obviously, work hard, yes. But if it goes too far, to the extreme, that is a problem. That is number one. Secondly, the other example is the cotton seed oil. He says cotton represents the cotton of clothing. He said also that represents a kind of gashmius, that a person is overly engrossed in that, in those concerns, and that kind of oil should not be used. Again, literally that kind of oil, but again, the message is that Shabbos is a time to recognize that there's a place for that. One should not be overly indulged in cotton, right, in gashmius. And the third example is Reish Lakish, and that is the Kikayon de Yonah. And what is that? Well, just the pasuk, when it talks about the Kikayon, at the very end of Yonah, it says, Shabin, you can look at the very bottom source. Perek Daled is the last psukim of Sefer Yonah. It says, Shabin Laila Haya, Ubin Laila Avad. Right? It's something that's here today, gone tomorrow. So what is Shabbos? Shabbos is teaching us to put our values in the right place. Right? There are things, and we put a lot of effort into things that are not lasting, that are not eternal values, that are not Torah values. And to make sure that Shabbos, so don't bring any of these oils into Shabbos. Right? This is not how one lights the Shabbos candles. Again, on a literal level, yes, these kinds of oil should not be used, the Shem and Keek. But it means that, and Rav Kook is talking about the spiritual idea. Right? These spiritual ideas, when it comes to Shabbos, that we recognize, and that's what Shabbos does, it sensitizes us to the ideals and the values of that are eternal, that are Torah values, that are the values of mitzvot and the Torah. Yes, please.
How many men look at the candles?
How many men? Well, this.
Big emphasis on candles. The women.
Well,
like,
it's for every. I mean.
And the men are running around doing everything and leaving to go to shul.
Okay, it's for everyone. The candles are for everyone. A lot of people have it on the table, or they have it near the table. People see it. By the way, there was a minhag, and I know the Chafetz Chaim was makpid on this halacha, that he would set the candles before the wife would light the candles, but that the man would set the candles before Shabbos, would prepare the candles before Shabbos. What?
Some people also light the wick. If they use a wick, that the men light.
That the men light prior, yeah.
They're supposed to look at Kiddush. They're supposed to look at the candles.
Okay, looking at the candles during Kiddush. Okay, good. Okay, anything else? Okay, good. One last source from Rav Kook, and then we'll end with a story or two. So one last source. This is the top of page 4. And yes, please, go ahead. Yes. Very nice. Very nice, very nice, very nice. Yes, good. This week's parasha Baloscha, that the Kohanim would prepare not only to light the candles, but they prepared for the lighting of the candle. That was also considered an avoda. So that's true, and that's some have that minhag that the men of the home. It was the minhag of the Chavetz Chaim. So it's a good for the men out there. It's not something that I do. Maybe I should take it on, but it's a beautiful minhag to be the one to prepare the candles. That they're all in place, so the wife is ready to light the candles before Shabbos. So one last teaching from the Gemara, which is a well-known line from the Gemara, and Rav Kook gives it a very beautiful interpretation. So Amar Leah Kadosh Baruch Hu. So the Holy One, blessed be He. This is the top of page 4, Gemara Shabbos Daf Yud. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Matana Tova. I have a very good gift. Yeshli bebeis ginzi. I have a beautiful gift in my storehouse. The Shabbat Shema, and the name of this gift is Shabbos. Ve'ani mevakesh litana liYisrael, and I want to give this gift to the Jewish people. Lech v'hodiam, go and tell them about this gift that I'm going to give them. So it's a very beautiful statement. One little interpretation that Rav Kook gives to this, and what does it mean? And I guess what's strange about this statement, or one could ask, is what does it mean, Beit Ginzi? It's something that's in my storehouse, in my geniza, if you know that term, a geniza, where people sometimes will put shemus. I get that question every few weeks. Does Torah Tibbetz need to go into the geniza? The answer is yes, ideally it should be. But that's the word here, geniza. I have Shabbos, it's in my geniza, it's in my storehouse, in this special place, and I want to bring it to the Jewish people. Go and tell the Jewish people that I'm going to give them Shabbos. That's what the Gemara says. So Rav Kook, one line from Rav Kook in interpreting this Gemara, HaShabbos u'kedushata. Again, you have the quote from the Gemara, and now the Rav Kook's interpretation. HaShabbat u'kedushata. He says, Shabbos and its holiness, ein pe'ulata hashlema al shomreha nikeret b'chol ercho meyad. That one cannot see, one cannot fathom, one cannot grasp all that there is within Shabbos, all the treasures, all the gifts that's found within Shabbos. Ki hi movila otam el mataratam b'derech harucha. It's a long process, Shabbos. Now, I think there are different ways of interpreting this, but I'll say the following in a moment. Shel hazman haoveh el hatid. It represents this moment, but it represents a future moment as well. So Rav Kook says, what is Ginzi? What does this treasure house mean? I mean that Shabbos itself is something like a geniza. There's something very deep within Shabbos itself. You have to search inside of Shabbos for all that it contains. And I think, when we're young, and I remember not that long ago, right, as a young man, you're kind of like waiting for Shabbos to end. I mean, it's sort of like a nice day, but you're like kind of waiting till Shabbos is over. You can get back to what you really want to do. So that Shabbos, at one level, you get a little bit older, and you realize that there's really more to Shabbos. And as I have found that in my own life, as I'm moving on, getting older in life, like recognizing just how special Shabbos is, right? That we don't want to let go of Shabbos. There's a story Rabbi Soloveitchik tells when he was a young man. He was a boy, I think just 8, 9, 10 years old, and he lived near a Muzhitz shtibel, where he lived. And again, he was not of that world per se, but he would often go there. And he tells one story. He was coming towards the end of Shabbos, and he wanted to daven Mariv. He walked into the shtibel, and he said, would be a normal question, what time are you ending Shabbos? And the chassid who was there just couldn't believe that he was asking the question, what time are we finishing Shabbos? Are we concluding Shabbos? We don't want Shabbos to end. What does it mean, what time is Shabbos ending? Right, in my house, that's like a regular, what time is Shabbos over? What time is Shabbos over? That's a normal thing for kids to ask that question. But Rav Kook says that as we learn more about Shabbos, right, the achana that we have, the desire for Shabbos, as we anticipate Shabbos, we wait for Shabbos, that's going to affect our Shabbos as well. And it's going to affect also the ending of Shabbos, that we want Shabbos, ideally to continue on and on. Just two anecdotes just to end our learning this morning. One is from Rav Aryeh Levin, the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim. and he was, of course, a very close Talmud of Rav Kook. So he was, as we know, he was the great tzaddik, the chesed that he would do every single day. He would fill his day with chesed, with visiting people, with taking care of people, bringing people into his home. Every day also he received mail. Right, in those years, you would receive mail. I think they stopped. I don't know. I haven't gotten a piece of mail in a while. But in the old days, they would there was mail that was delivered, and he would get tens of pieces of mail on a regular basis of people asking for his help, and really difficult stories for him to read that he would really take to heart, from orphans and from widows and people that were really struggling, people that needed tzedakah. So he writes that it was his custom, Rabbi Levin, that on Erev Shabbos, that he would not read any of that. Those hours before Shabbos, where normally he would read in the afternoon, he would save that mail that day for after Shabbos. That he wanted to go into Shabbos not with that heaviness. And to think about how we go into Shabbos, the appropriate way to go into Shabbos. So that's one story. And that was a hachana, a preparation that he had for Shabbos, that Shabbos should come in with a lot of joy and happiness, that he shouldn't have the burdens of the week. Maybe we stop reading our emails and our WhatsApps a little bit earlier, or certainly some of the news that we're reading, stop reading it a little bit earlier in the day, and just to bring in Shabbos with the joy of Shabbos. And I'll just end with the following story. This is a Hasidic story, a classic Baal Shem Tov story. The founder of Hasidus. It comes from a book called Good Vach, stories that you can read after Shabbos. Good Vach from Art Scroll. But this is an Erev Shabbos story. I'll read it. I'll read it from the Sefer, and we'll end with this. Once at the Friday night Suda of Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the famous Baal Shem Tov, he started to laugh after the fish course had been served. No one present could figure out the reason for this, and when he laughed again after the soup, they were further puzzled. It happened a third time after the main course, and the Hasidim begged their Rebbe for an explanation. The Baal Shem Tov promised that one would be forthcoming after Shabbos. That Motzei Shabbos, the Baal Shem Tov and his Hasidim set out for a certain village. They came to the house of Reb Shabsi Hapstein, an impoverished bookbinder. And Rabbi Yisrael, the Baal Shem Tov, said, "Tell us what happened on Shabbos." Replied the man, "Well, it seems you already know that something happened. I will tell you what it was. This Erev Shabbos, we had no food in the house. We had no wine, so I thought we would make kiddush on mead. But we had no mead either. I thought we could use challahs, but we had no challahs. In fact, we had no food at all. There was nothing I could do but go to the base medrash and to study on that Erev Shabbos. Before I left, I cautioned my wife not to borrow from any neighbors. Of course, Reb Shabsi went on. His wife was despondent about the lack of necessities for Shabbos, but she was determined to do what she could in honor of the special day. Recalling that she had a beautiful dress left from her mother stored in the attic, she went upstairs to look for it. To her delight, she realized that it had 3 gold buttons. Hurrying to the market, she sold them to buy food for Shabbos. When I returned from shul and saw the Shabbos table laden with food, continued the simple bookbinder, I thought my wife must have broken her promise, but I decided not to say anything. She told me how Hashem had provided for us by causing her to remember about her mother's dress so that she could prepare a beautiful Shabbos without having to accept any help from others. I was so overjoyed that I danced with my wife around the table. And after the next course, we danced again. And after the chicken, we danced again. Said the Baal Shem Tov to the bookbinder, when you danced, the angels in heaven were so delighted that they danced as well. And when I saw this, I laughed. Tell me, Reb Shabsi, is there anything you wish for? Sighing, Reb Shabsi told the tzaddik that after many years he and his wife were childless. The Baal Shem Tov told him that they would have a son that year who would grow up to be a great tzaddik, and so it was. They named their son Yisrael after the Baal Shem Tov, and he became the famous Maggid of Koznitz. So that is the classic Hasidic story. But it's a story thinking back to what Rabbi Soloveitchik, what we opened with this morning, the beautiful idea of the Erev Shabbos Jew. Right? Not only that we observe the Shabbos itself, but the anticipation, the love, the way that we look forward to Shabbos, the way that we prepare for Shabbos. And that preparation has great meaning, has great value, and it brings great meaning and purpose to the Shabbos as well. So we should all be zochet to celebrate Shabbos beautifully and to celebrate our Erev Shabbos, the days before Shabbos, with great meaning, and they should be uplifting. All right, wish everyone a wonderful day and a wonderful week ahead, and thank you for